Sometimes the most expensive mistake an airline can make isn't delaying a flight. It's humiliating the wrong passenger. By the time Flight 482 reached the runway, every seat was occupied, every overhead bin was closed, and every member of the cabin crew believed the problem had already been solved. They were wrong. 23 minutes later, an unfamiliar voice crackled through the cockpit radio. Ground control instructed the aircraft to stop immediately. A private Gulfstream had entered the active taxiway and refused to move. Inside the cabin, confused passengers pressed against the windows. A line of airport emergency vehicles began appearing in the distance. Nobody understood why a private jet would risk violating every airport regulation just to block a commercial airliner from taking off. Nobody except one man sitting quietly in seat 34A. Nathan Brooks rested one hand on the worn leather backpack beneath the seat in front of him, while his 8-year-old daughter, Lily, leaned against his shoulder, still clutching the stuffed rabbit she carried on every trip. Neither of them looked toward the windows. Neither of them seemed surprised by the sudden stop. Nathan simply checked his watch, then returned his attention to Lily as if the delay had nothing to do with him. The passengers around them reacted differently. Some groaned. Others reached for their phones. A businessman muttered about missing a connection in Dallas. Across the aisle, an elderly couple exchanged worried looks after spotting flashing lights outside. Flight attendants hurried through the cabin wearing polite smiles that grew less convincing with every passing second. Up front, Captain Victoria Hale stood inside the cockpit doorway listening to the latest transmission from ground control. Her jaw tightened. "They're saying the runway remains occupied," the first officer said. "Occupied by what?" Victoria asked. "Private aircraft registration not responding to relocation requests." Victoria frowned. That made no sense. Airport operations simply did not work that way. Private jets didn't wander onto active taxiways by accident. And if they did, security removed them within minutes. Yet this aircraft hadn't moved. It was waiting. She stepped into the business class aisle, forcing confidence into every movement, while passengers searched her face for answers. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "we're experiencing an unexpected ground delay. We appreciate your patience." The announcement did little to calm anyone. Questions spread through the cabin in quiet waves. Near the front, Lauren Pierce folded her arms with visible irritation. Only 20 minutes earlier, she had insisted that the quiet single father in business class didn't belong there. She had demanded that the crew correct what she called an obvious seating mistake. Captain Hale had agreed. The man had offered no argument. He had simply gathered his old leather bag, taken his daughter's hand, and walked toward economy without a single complaint. At the time, Victoria believed she had prevented an unnecessary confrontation before departure. Looking back now, she couldn't explain why that memory suddenly refused to leave her. Then another message arrived through the cockpit headset. This time, the color drained from the first officer's face. He looked toward Victoria without speaking. She reached for the headset herself. After listening for only 3 seconds, her expression changed completely. Slowly, almost unwillingly, she turned her eyes toward seat 34A, where Nathan Brooks remained quietly beside his daughter, waiting as though he already knew exactly what was about to happen. 3 hours earlier, nothing about Nathan Brooks suggested that he belonged anywhere near the world of private aviation. He parked an aging dark blue SUV in the long-term parking garage, slung a weathered leather backpack over one shoulder, and reached into the back seat to help Lily unbuckle her seatbelt. "Ready for our adventure?" he asked. Lily grinned and held up her stuffed rabbit. "Mr. Buttons is ready." Nathan laughed quietly. "Good. Because he has to help us survive airport food." Lily giggled as they walked toward the terminal, her small hand wrapped around 2 of his fingers. Travelers hurried past them pulling expensive luggage, checking luxury watches, and talking into wireless headsets. Nathan moved at a slower pace. Every few steps he glanced down to make sure Lily could keep up. That habit had never left him, even though she insisted she was already a big girl. At the entrance, a skycap offered to carry their bags. Nathan smiled politely and declined. They only had one backpack and a small pink suitcase covered with travel stickers collected over several years. Most of the stickers came from places Lily barely remembered. Nathan remembered every single one. They represented promises he had refused to break after his wife passed away 4 years earlier. No matter how busy work became, he would always make time to show his daughter another corner of the world. They entered the terminal without attracting a second glance. That was exactly how Nathan preferred it. His clothes were simple. A navy bomber jacket, gray polo shirt, dark khaki pants, brown leather shoes polished from habit rather than fashion. There was no luxury watch on his wrist. No designer luggage. No security detail following behind him. To everyone around him, he looked like an ordinary middle-class father trying to stretch every dollar for one special trip with his daughter. Lily looked up as an enormous private jet taxied past the terminal windows. "Daddy, do people really own airplanes like that?" Nathan followed her gaze for only a moment before smiling. "Some do. Would you ever want one?" she asked innocently. He looked back at her instead of the aircraft. "Only if it helped me spend more time with you." She accepted the answer without another question. Children rarely cared about wealth. They cared about presence. Nathan silently hoped she would keep that innocence for as long as possible. His phone vibrated once. A single notification appeared on the screen. Aircraft ready. Crew awaiting confirmation. He dismissed the message before Lily could accidentally read it. A second later another notification appeared. Hangar secured. Departure window available. He cleared that one too. Lily tugged gently on his sleeve. "Daddy, are those work messages? Just people who don't know today belongs to you." Without another word, he switched the phone completely off and slipped it into his pocket. Whatever waited on the other side of those messages could wait a few more hours. His daughter could not. They stopped outside a bookstore where Lily spotted a paperback about constellations. Nathan bought it without looking at the price tag. As the cashier handed over the receipt, she smiled politely. "Flying somewhere fun?" "Just making another memory," Nathan answered. Neither the cashier nor the people standing behind them realized that less than an hour later, nearly everyone inside Terminal C would unknowingly cross paths with the quiet father who had just chosen a $10 children's book over answering messages that could move millions of dollars with a single phone call. The first judgment came less than 60 seconds after they entered the premium check-in line. Nathan noticed it only because Lily noticed it first. "Daddy," she whispered, tugging gently at his jacket. "Why is that lady looking at us?" Nathan glanced toward the neighboring counter. A sharply dressed woman in an ivory designer suit was watching them with open disbelief. Her leather carry-on probably cost more than Nathan's entire outfit. She quickly looked away when their eyes met, but not before letting out a quiet sigh of annoyance. Nathan simply smiled at Lily. Sometimes people are just curious. He never corrected strangers. Experience had taught him that first impressions were expensive to argue with and impossible to refund. When their turn arrived, the airline agent greeted them politely enough. "Good morning. Boarding passes, please." Nathan handed over his phone. The young employee scanned the digital tickets, then frowned. She scanned them again. Her eyebrows lifted almost imperceptibly before she glanced at Nathan, then at his backpack, then back to the screen. "One moment, sir." She quietly called over a supervisor. The supervisor repeated the process, her expression changing in exactly the same sequence. Confusion. Doubt. Verification. Finally, a practiced smile. "Everything looks correct. Enjoy your flight, Mr. Brooks." Nathan thanked her, accepted the printed luggage tags, and walked away without noticing the two employees exchanging puzzled looks behind the counter. "Business class?" one whispered after he left. "Apparently. You sure that reservation isn't flagged?" "Already checked twice." "Weird." Nathan heard none of it. Lily had discovered an aquarium near the security entrance, and for the next 5 minutes, tiny tropical fish became the most important creatures in the world. Security screening went smoothly until another passenger stepped into line behind them. Lauren Pierce recognized Nathan almost immediately from the premium check-in area. She watched him place his old backpack into a gray plastic bin and quietly frowned. Her eyes moved from his worn shoes to Lily's stuffed rabbit, then to the business class priority tag attached to the suitcase. The combination simply didn't fit the picture she had already built in her mind. She leaned toward another traveler standing nearby. People really know how to game the system these days. The man shrugged. Maybe he got upgraded. Lauren gave a skeptical smile. Or maybe someone made a mistake. Nathan heard the comment but continued helping Lily through the metal detector. She skipped happily to the other side, completely unaware that adults often built entire stories around people they had never met. After security, they entered the airline lounge. Once again, conversation subtly slowed. Several guests looked toward the father and daughter before returning to their coffee or laptops. Nobody said anything directly. Nobody had to. Their expressions spoke clearly enough. Nathan chose a quiet corner beside the windows overlooking the runway. Lily opened her constellation book while Nathan poured her a small cup of hot chocolate. He checked his watch. 45 minutes until boarding. His phone remained switched off inside his jacket pocket. Across the lounge, Lauren Pierce entered moments later. She scanned the room, spotted Nathan immediately, and frowned even deeper. This time she didn't keep her opinion to herself. She walked directly toward the reception desk. "Excuse me," she said in a voice just loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "I think you may want to double-check whether everyone in this lounge actually belongs here." The lounge receptionist maintained the same pleasant smile she had offered every guest that morning. "Is there a problem, ma'am?" Lauren Pierce folded her boarding pass onto the marble counter. "Probably just a misunderstanding. I noticed a gentleman over there with a little girl." She nodded discreetly toward Nathan and Lily. "I don't believe they're supposed to be in the business lounge." The receptionist glanced at her screen before looking toward Nathan. "Mr. Brooks has full access, ma'am." Lauren forced a polite laugh. "Are you absolutely certain?" "Yes." "Perhaps you should verify it again." The receptionist did exactly that, more out of courtesy than necessity. She scanned Nathan's reservation a second time. Then a third. The result never changed. Business class. Full lounge privileges. Priority boarding. She looked back at Lauren. "Everything is correct." Lauren thanked her, but dissatisfaction remained written across her face. Across the room, Nathan was helping Lily identify constellations inside her new book. "That's Orion," Lily said proudly, pointing at a page. "Very good. Can you really find him in the sky?" "Only if you know where to look." Nathan smiled. "Most people don't." The sentence carried more meaning than either of them realized. Boarding began 25 minutes later. Business class passengers formed a short line beside gate C18. Nathan waited until the crowd had almost disappeared before standing. He had never enjoyed rushing. Lily slipped her small hand into his. "Can we go now?" "Now we can." As they reached the boarding scanner, the gate agent welcomed them warmly. "Good afternoon, Mr. Brooks. Welcome aboard." Their boarding passes beeped green. Behind them, Lauren Pierce watched the scanner approve their tickets without hesitation. Her expression hardened. She followed them down the jet bridge, mentally replaying every detail she had observed since the lounge. The backpack. The old shoes. The little girl. None of it matched the image she associated with premium cabins. Inside the aircraft, a flight attendant smiled as she directed Nathan toward row 3. "Right this way, sir." Nathan thanked her. Lily climbed into the window seat with visible excitement, while Nathan carefully stored their weathered leather backpack in the overhead compartment. He buckled Lily's seatbelt before fastening his own. She immediately pressed her face against the window, fascinated by the luggage carts moving below. A few moments later, Lauren entered the cabin. She stopped the instant she noticed Nathan seated only a few rows ahead. Her eyes narrowed. She leaned toward another flight attendant. "Excuse me." Yes, ma'am? Lauren lowered her voice, though not enough to prevent nearby passengers from overhearing. I think someone may be sitting in the wrong section. The flight attendant glanced toward Nathan. Which passenger? Lauren pointed discreetly. The man with the child. The attendant hesitated. I believe he's assigned there. Believe? Lauren replied calmly. Or no? The question lingered. The attendant walked toward the forward galley where Captain Victoria Hale had just stepped out of the cockpit for a final cabin inspection. After listening to the explanation, Victoria looked briefly toward Nathan Brooks. From where she stood, she saw exactly what Lauren had described, an ordinary-looking father wearing inexpensive clothes, sitting comfortably in one of the airline's most exclusive seats. She did not yet know his name. She did not review the reservation herself. Instead, she trusted the quiet confidence of an experienced frequent flyer who insisted something was wrong. Victoria straightened her uniform jacket and began walking toward row 3. Nathan looked up as her shadow stopped beside his seat. Lily looked up too. The captain offered a professional smile that never quite reached her eyes. Sir, she said softly, I'm afraid we need to discuss your seating assignment. The conversation lasted less than 1 minute. It changed the entire flight. Nathan looked up at Captain Victoria Hale with the same calm expression he had worn since entering the airport. Is there a problem? He asked. Victoria kept her voice professional. Sir, there appears to be an issue regarding your assigned seating. Nathan reached into his jacket and handed her his boarding pass without hesitation. She studied it carefully. Seat 3A. Business class. Everything matched. For a brief moment, uncertainty crossed her face. Then she looked toward Lauren Pierce, who remained standing several rows behind with folded arms and unmistakable confidence. Victoria lowered her voice. Would you mind stepping into the galley for just a moment? Nathan glanced at Lily. She looked from her father to the captain without understanding why adults suddenly seemed so serious. Will we still fly together? She asked quietly. Nathan smiled. Always. He unfastened his seat belt and followed the captain toward the front of the aircraft. The cabin became strangely quiet. Conversations slowed as nearby passengers sensed something unusual unfolding. Inside the galley, Victoria took a careful breath. Mr. Brooks, your ticket is valid. However, one of our premium passengers has raised concerns. Nathan waited. She believes there may have been an error in your assignment. Nathan remained silent for several seconds before asking a single question. Do you believe that too? Victoria hesitated. She had not expected the question. I believe my responsibility is to ensure every passenger is seated appropriately. Nathan nodded once. I understand. Another flight attendant approached with a tablet displaying the seating manifest. Captain, the reservation checks out. Victoria glanced at the screen. Everything remained exactly as printed. Still, the pressure of delaying departure weighed heavily on her mind. Lauren stepped closer before anyone could end the discussion. Captain, this is becoming ridiculous. We all paid for a certain standard of service. She looked directly at Nathan before continuing. People shouldn't be able to exploit the system while genuine premium customers lose confidence in the airline. Nathan said nothing. Victoria studied his face one last time, searching for irritation, frustration, anything that might help justify her instinct. Instead, she found only patience. Somehow, that unsettled her even more. She made a decision. Mr. Brooks, she said, we would like to offer you complimentary seating in Economy Plus today. You'll have additional legroom, and your daughter can remain beside you. Silence followed. A younger flight attendant looked visibly uncomfortable. She knew there was no operational reason for the change. This was simply the fastest way to satisfy an influential customer before departure. Lily walked over and slipped her hand into Nathan's. Daddy, did we do something wrong? Several nearby passengers looked away. Nathan knelt until he was at eye level with her. No, sweetheart. Then why do we have to move? He brushed a loose strand of hair away from her face. Because sometimes people make decisions before they know the whole story. He stood, lifted the old leather backpack from the overhead compartment, and placed it over one shoulder. Without raising his voice, without asking for a manager, without reminding anyone that his ticket was completely valid, he simply took Lily's hand and walked toward the rear of the aircraft. As he reached row 34, he slipped his phone from his jacket pocket for the first time that day. The screen came alive. He typed only 6 words before pressing send. Proceed to runway. Await my confirmation. Then he quietly switched the phone back off. 10 minutes later, the aircraft door closed. Flight attendants completed their final cabin checks with practiced efficiency, and the captain's voice echoed through the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Flight 482. We expect an on-time departure with smooth weather for today's journey. Thank you for choosing to fly with us. The engine slowly came alive beneath the wings. From row 34, Lily smiled as she felt the gentle vibration beneath her feet. We're moving, she whispered. Nathan looked out the small window beside her. Not yet, he answered quietly. We're only beginning. The aircraft pushed back from the gate exactly on schedule. Tug vehicles disconnected. Ground crews signaled the all clear. Everything appeared perfectly ordinary. Up front, Lauren Pierce relaxed into her wide leather seat with a satisfied expression. She accepted a glass of sparkling water from a flight attendant and opened her laptop, already convinced the unpleasant distraction had been resolved. Captain Victoria Hale taxied confidently toward runway 27. Tower, Flight 482 ready for departure. Flight 482, continue taxi. Hold short of runway 27. Holding short, Flight 482. Nothing unusual. Another routine instruction. 30 seconds passed. Then another transmission arrived. Flight 482, remain in position. Victoria exchanged a quick glance with her first officer. Any traffic? Negative. They waited. Outside, ground vehicles began moving with unexpected urgency. 2 airport operations trucks crossed an adjacent taxiway. An airport security SUV accelerated toward the far end of the runway. Tower, Flight 482 requesting update. This time, the reply came after several seconds of silence. Flight 482. Active runway temporarily unavailable. Victoria frowned. Reason? The controller hesitated before answering. Private aircraft occupying taxi intersection. Inside the cockpit, either pilot spoke for several moments. Occupying? The first officer repeated. That's impossible. Victoria reached for her binoculars and looked through the windshield. Nearly a mile ahead, a sleek black Gulfstream rested motionless near the runway entrance. Its navigation lights remained on. Its engines continued idling. Yet it made no attempt to move. Tower, has the aircraft acknowledged instructions? Negative. Emergency? Negative. Mechanical issue? Another pause. Negative. The captain slowly lowered the binoculars. Nothing about the situation made sense. Airport procedures left almost no room for this kind of delay. Yet every minute passed without movement. Back in the cabin, passengers began noticing the unusual stop. Heads turned toward the windows. Phones appeared. Questions spread quietly through every row. Why aren't we taking off? What's happening out there? One flight attendant walked quickly toward the cockpit while another reassured passengers with carefully rehearsed smiles. Nathan remained exactly where he was. His posture never changed. Lily continued reading her constellation book until she finally looked up. Daddy, she whispered. Are we waiting for another airplane? Nathan looked at the motionless Gulfstream in the distance before answering. Something like that. At that exact moment, far across the airport inside the Executive Operations Building, an emergency phone rang on the desk of Chief Executive Officer Daniel Mercer. He answered without looking away from the financial reports spread across his desk. Within 5 seconds, his face lost all color. Repeat that, he said quietly. The voice on the other end spoke only one sentence. Daniel stood so abruptly that his chair rolled backward into the wall. You're telling me, he said slowly, that Mr. Nathan Brooks has just been removed from business class? No one in the room answered. They didn't have to. Daniel grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. Prepare my car, he ordered. And nobody lets that airplane leave the ground until I get there. Daniel Mercer reached the airport operations center in less than 4 minutes. His driver barely had time to stop before the airline's chief executive stepped out and crossed the lobby at a pace no one had ever seen. Employees moved aside instinctively. They had witnessed flight delays before. They had witnessed emergencies before. They had never seen the CEO abandon a board meeting to race across the airport for a single passenger. Status, Daniel demanded as he entered the operations room. An airport supervisor hurried toward him. Flight 482 is holding short of runway 27. The private Gulfstream is maintaining position exactly as instructed. Daniel nodded once. Good. Sir, should we ask the aircraft to move? Daniel stopped walking. Not until I understand exactly what happened. Silence filled the room. Every monitor displayed the same commercial aircraft waiting helplessly on the taxiway. Daniel pointed toward another screen. Pull every camera from gate C18, the business lounge, premium check-in, and the boarding bridge. Now. Within seconds, security footage began appearing across multiple displays. There was Nathan helping Lily choose a children's book. Nathan checking in without incident. Nathan quietly sitting in the lounge. Nathan boarding with a perfectly valid business class ticket. Then the cameras captured Lauren Pierce speaking to the lounge receptionist. Another angle showed her approaching the flight attendants after boarding. Another displayed Captain Victoria Hale asking Nathan to leave row 3. Finally, the boarding bridge camera showed Nathan carrying the old leather backpack while Lily followed beside him into economy. Daniel watched the entire sequence without saying a word. Reservation records, he said. An operations manager pulled them onto the main screen. Confirmed business class. Paid in full. No upgrades. No standby. No seat conflict. Who authorized the seat reassignment? Another uncomfortable silence followed. Captain Hale, sir. Based on? Passenger complaint. Daniel looked slowly around the room. Not policy? No, sir. Not overbooking? No. Not safety? No. Appearance? No one answered. They didn't have to. Daniel already knew. He took a slow breath before speaking again. Open the cockpit audio. The recording began playing through the conference speakers. Every sentence echoed painfully inside the silent room. Nathan's calm voice. Victoria's hesitation. Lauren insisting that premium customers expected a certain standard. Lily asking, Daddy, did we do something wrong? The room remained completely still after the recording ended. One employee quietly removed his glasses. Another looked down at the floor. Daniel closed his eyes for only a moment. Enough. He turned toward the legal director. Begin preserving every recording. Then toward human resources. Nobody involved in this decision leaves the airport until interviews are completed. Finally, he faced airport operations. I want every employee to understand something. His voice remained calm, but every word carried unmistakable weight. The issue isn't that we embarrassed an influential client. He looked again at the frozen image of Nathan and Lily walking toward economy. The issue is that we humiliated a father in front of his daughter because someone decided his clothes mattered more than his boarding pass. At that exact moment, inside row 34, Lily leaned gently against Nathan's shoulder. Daddy, she whispered, is everyone angry because of us? Nathan looked out at the motionless Gulfstream waiting beyond the runway. Then he squeezed her hand. No, sweetheart. His voice remained soft. They're about to realize they were angry at the wrong person. The aircraft door opened again. A ripple of confusion moved through the cabin before anyone saw who had stepped aboard. Flight attendants looked toward the entrance with expressions that shifted from curiosity to disbelief. Daniel Mercer entered without speaking. He wore no smile. No badge needed to introduce him. Every uniformed employee recognized the airline's chief executive immediately. Captain Victoria Hale left the cockpit at once. "Mr. Mercer," she began. Daniel raised one hand. "Not yet." His voice remained quiet, but it carried through the front cabin with effortless authority. He walked slowly past business class, past Lauren Pierce, who instinctively lowered her eyes, and continued down the aisle without hesitation. Passengers turned in their seats to watch him pass. Nobody understood why the CEO of a major airline had personally boarded a delayed domestic flight. Daniel stopped only when he reached row 34. Nathan Brooks looked up from Lily's constellation book. Neither man appeared surprised to see the other. Daniel spoke first. "Mr. Brooks." Nathan nodded politely. "Good afternoon, Daniel." Several flight attendants exchanged startled glances. The CEO knew the quiet father by his first name. Daniel stood silently for a moment before doing something no one aboard had expected. He lowered his head. "On behalf of this airline, I owe you and your daughter an apology." The cabin fell completely silent. No engines. No conversations. Only the distant hum of conditioned air remained. Nathan looked at him calmly. "You don't owe me anything personally." Daniel shook his head. "Actually, I do. Because leadership accepts responsibility long before it assigns blame." He turned toward the front of the aircraft. "Captain Hale." Victoria stepped forward slowly. Daniel did not raise his voice. "Was Mr. Brooks' ticket valid?" "Yes, sir." "Was there any operational requirement to remove him from business class?" "No, sir." "Was there any safety issue?" "No, sir." Daniel nodded once. "Then explain to everyone on this aircraft why an 8-year-old girl had to ask her father whether she had done something wrong." Victoria opened her mouth but found no words. Across the aisle, Lauren Pierce shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She suddenly realized every passenger who had quietly supported her assumptions was now looking in her direction. Daniel faced the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, today's delay was not caused by weather. It was not caused by mechanical failure. It was caused by a failure of judgment." No one interrupted him. One of our passengers was asked to surrender the seat he had legally purchased because someone believed appearances mattered more than facts. Several passengers slowly lowered their eyes. Daniel turned back toward Nathan. "Your aircraft is waiting." The sentence spread through the cabin before anyone fully understood it. Nathan glanced toward Lily. She blinked in confusion. "Our airplane?" she whispered. Nathan smiled gently but said nothing. Daniel continued. "The Gulfstream occupying the taxiway belongs to Brooks Aviation Holdings." A collective breath seemed to leave the cabin all at once. Lauren's face lost its color. Captain Hale stared at Nathan as though seeing him for the first time. Daniel added quietly, "Its crew received only one instruction this afternoon." He looked directly at Nathan. "Do not move until my daughter is treated with dignity." Nathan remained seated. "I never asked them to embarrass anyone," he said softly. "I only asked them to wait." Daniel nodded. And they did exactly that. For the first time since boarding the aircraft, Captain Victoria Hale fully understood the magnitude of the mistake she had made. The man she had quietly escorted to economy had never needed business class at all. He had simply wanted to share one ordinary commercial flight with his little girl. And everyone else had made that impossible. No one applauded. Somehow, applause would have felt too small. Daniel Mercer quietly stepped aside, allowing Nathan to stand. The cabin remained frozen as Nathan reached for the weathered leather backpack that had followed him through every stage of the day. He slipped one shoulder strap into place before helping Lily zip up her little pink suitcase. She looked around at dozens of unfamiliar faces staring back at them. "Daddy," she whispered. "Why is everyone looking at us now?" Nathan smiled with the same gentle warmth she had seen all her life. "Because people usually look twice after they stop looking once." Lily frowned, trying to understand. She nodded anyway and took his hand. Together they walked toward the front of the aircraft. Every row they passed became quieter than the one before it. Several passengers who had silently watched the humiliation lowered their eyes as Nathan walked by. Others offered small apologetic smiles that arrived far too late. Lauren Pierce remained seated, her hands folded tightly in her lap. For the first time that day, she had nothing to say. As Nathan reached her row, she slowly stood. "Mr. Brooks." Her voice barely rose above a whisper. Nathan stopped. She struggled to find the polished confidence that had carried her through the morning, but it was gone. "I judged you without knowing anything about you." Nathan waited patiently. "I'm sorry." He studied her face for a brief moment before answering. "Then don't remember me." Lauren looked confused. Nathan continued. "Remember the next person you think you already understand." Without another word, he continued toward the aircraft door. Captain Victoria Hale stood waiting beside it. Her cap rested quietly in her hands instead of on her head. "Mr. Brooks," she began. Nathan looked at her. "There isn't an apology big enough for what happened today," she said honestly. "I failed you. More importantly, I failed your daughter." Nathan glanced toward Lily, who was already watching airport vehicles through the open doorway. "Then promise me something." Victoria nodded immediately. "The next father who boards your aircraft wearing old shoes," Nathan said softly, "let his boarding pass speak before anyone else's opinion." Tears gathered in Victoria's eyes as she answered with a single word. "I will." Outside, the afternoon sun reflected across the polished black fuselage of the waiting Gulfstream. Its crew stood beside the stairs, not with military precision or theatrical ceremony, but with quiet respect. One pilot opened the cabin door as Nathan and Lily approached. Lily looked up in amazement. "Daddy," she whispered. "Is this really our airplane?" Nathan knelt beside her. "No, sweetheart." She blinked. "It isn't?" He smiled. "It's only an airplane. What belongs to us is something much more important." "What's that?" Nathan gently squeezed her little hand. "The way we treat people, even when they don't treat us the same." Lily smiled as if she had just learned the most valuable lesson in the world. Hand in hand, they climbed the stairs together. Moments later, the Gulfstream turned gracefully onto the runway that had waited patiently for them. Behind its windows, Nathan never looked back toward the commercial airliner. He had nothing left to prove. As the jet lifted into the evening sky, hundreds of people remained on the ground thinking about the same simple truth. Respect should never be upgraded only after discovering someone's wealth. Because the greatest measure of a person is not the seat they occupy, but the dignity they refuse to surrender.